Hi, I am Thomas Haslett. On March 13, 2024, I am with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation Share Your Story project. Bellevue University is a sponsor of the NVVMF Memorial Park, and I am at the Bellevue University Military Veterans Center with Army National Guard vet James L. Nekuda.
Right.
Thank you. Who has agreed to share his story for the Library of Congress History Project and the Nebraska Veterans Memorial Park Project. James likes to be referred to Jeff. So Jeff, let's begin with your full name. Your full name?
James Lee Nekuda.
Okay. Where were you born?
Where? Omaha.
St.
St. Joe Hospital.
St. Joe.
10th Street? Yeah, 10th Street it's on.
What did your parents do?
My dad worked at Swift and Company, and they had a feedlot. They had cattle, sheep, and he more or less, well, he worked there. He worked in the plant before, and then he was transferred to the feedlot. He was the manager of the.
How long did he work there for?
Oh,
30 years.
At least 30 years. But then in '69, Swifts went away, like all of the packing houses in South Omaha. And so he didn't. He was salary, and so he just took whatever severance he had coming, and he was. But he couldn't just sit around, so he got a job for Ralston Public Schools, and he was a watchman, or no, he was
Custodian.
Well, yeah, he was a custodian for them for might be been a couple of years. It was, but then after he passed away. He was only 61 when he died.
And your mom?
What did your mother do?
Mom, she was a housewife. There was my brother and I. There was two boys, and she stayed at home and was a housewife until we were off to school. Then after that, she, in about 1960 or 61, she went to work for Eli Lilly, Elanco Corporation. It was called here in Nebraska, and they were up on 42nd Street and 42nd X about. And she worked there
Till she retired.
till she retired. My dad passed away 1974, I think it was.
What was your brother's name?
Leon J. Nekuda. Leon James Nekuda.
Do you recall a funny story with him that you can relate to?
Oh,
Lee left his car with you one time and you put the pipes on the back of it.
Oh yeah, he came home he was in the Marines, and he came home on leave, I think it was, and my dad just got a new car, and he was given a 55 Ford to my brother, and one time that they were sitting talking in the kitchen at the kitchen table, and Jan and I pulled up, and I had just put scavenger pipes on my 59 Chevy, and I had some leftover pipe, and so we thought it would be funny if we took and stuck it on the 55 Ford, like my brother did it, and that was pretty funny. Yeah, they stuck out about this far from the bumper, and I knew my dad was going to go nuts. So, but he come out there and looked at it, and he's really. So that was, and my brother and I were both laughing, and Jan was laughing, and he knew it was a joke, so it was funny.
This lovely lady next to you, Jan, tell me about her. How'd you meet?
Well, we met when I got a job in her dad's grocery store. We had just moved up to where we were on Harrison Street, and I was about a freshman. Yeah, I was a freshman in high school. I was just going to start freshman, and I walked down it wasn't very far from our house. I walked down to the store. He had a grocery store and a shopping center down the street, and so I got up the courage and I went and I asked him for a job, and he says, "Well, I don't have anything right now in the store, but," he said, "I got some windows to put up on his house, and take down the screens and put up the windows, because there's going to be winter, see?" So I said, "Sure, I'll do that," and I did it. And then that lasted a couple of days, 3 days, something like that. And then he put me with his father. His dad was
Retired.
He was retired, and he had this place called Hill Haven out on 36th Street, and I'd go out there and I work with him, painting or picking up. He had a picnic area where people have picnics, and then we'd go out and pick up whatever was they threw away, and we used to take and haul it down the field. It was a pretty good sized place, but that was what I did when I first started for Al at the store. Then eventually I went and I was able to start working at the store, and I worked there all through high school, and that's how I met Jan.
What, she worked at the store too?
Oh yeah, yep.
I was 13 and he was 14.
Wow.
And he had to pass the grandpa test. He had to go with my grandfather. My grandfather was pretty tough on people. And if he passed grandpa's test, then he was good enough to work in the store. So then he got to work in the store.
I see a smile there. Talking to your brother, he was a Marine?
He was a Marine, yeah.
How much older was he?
3 years.
3.5, 4 years. 3.5, really. He was born in 41, and I was born in 45.
Did he So when you joined the Air National Guard, was he already in, or did he get out before?
He had already been out of the Marines.
Yeah, he was out by that time. See, I was still in high school, I think, when he got out. I was working at H.P. Smith then. It's a Ford dealership on L Street.
What did you think about him being a Marine?
Well, I thought it was pretty tough. I thought, he really but I always say that I always tell people, well, my brother was a Marine. So,
Did he
I
go,
thought was pretty proud.
Did he go over Vietnam?
No,
No, this was before
it was before.
it even started. This was in 1961. He went in.
He did go to Okinawa.
Yeah, he was in Okinawa for a while, and then he got out in like 64, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
What was your decision? Why did you want to join the National Guard?
well, I didn't want to be somebody that got drafted, because you don't really get to pick what you want to do, But so there was something in the Guard, and that way I could I had a choice maybe. And it wasn't the Army, the regular Army. It was the Guard. And that
We were already married by that time.
yeah, we were already married by then.
Did you have a hard time breaking it to your wife about joining the Guard?
No,
No, it wasn't.
we talked about it.
Yeah,
Most of our friends had either gone into the Army or were in the National Guard. A lot of them were in the National Guard.
yeah.
And so I
So-
think most of it was his friends talking.
So what did you join the Army National Guard to do?
Well, they thought he was going to be a mechanic, I think.
Yeah, I thought, because I worked at H.P. Smith, and mechanics is what I was mostly trained for by Ford Motor Company. But when I got in the Guard, they didn't. I had that was all down on my papers and everything. But they put me in a mortar platoon. It's headquarters company. It was the mortar platoon of headquarters company, and I mean, it didn't make any difference to me. It was pretty hard work. I mean, when we first started, because we weren't mechanized then. Then we got mechanized a few years later, and the 4-point deuce 4-point deuce mortar is pretty heavy. I mean, the barrel is like this, and it's, I don't know how many feet long, but you have to carry that around. Then there's a base plate that goes on the bottom that this big, and it's real heavy too. And you had to carry all this stuff and put it in the back of a 3/4 ton truck. And then when you went to set up, you got there and you had to unload everything and put it all together, and then you could fire the mortar.
What didn't basic training toughen you up for some physical activity like that?
Oh, sure. That's the best thing for anybody, to go to basic training.
What did you have a hard time in basic training?
Well, this knee deal happened to me there. I was running the close confidence course, and I got to the tower. I don't know how high that was, but it was pretty high. And got up there. You had to go up one level at a time, but there was no ladder. You just had to lift yourself up and then up, and there was about 3 of them I know of, and they must have been at least 10 feet. And I got up there, and drill sergeant's howling, and all these guys, they're all behind me, see? And they're, and they're afraid to jump. And so I don't know, a couple of guys jumped, so I thought, oh, I'm gonna jump too. So I jumped, and I landed sideways on my knee, on this knee, and it popped real bad, and I couldn't walk on it. I had a limp to the next. This was a close confidence course. You had to go to the next thing, and so I made it as far as I could. And then a sergeant come over to me and he says, "You just go back to the company area." So that's where I went. And then the next day they put me on sick call, and I went to North Post at Fort Polk, Louisiana, on the North Post. I was on South Post, and it was so I had to go by bus to get to it. And then I seen a doctor there, but all they gave me was an aspirin and an ace bandage. So back I went, and then I found out I had to be on guard duty that weekend. So I was lucky, though. They put me on supernumerary. That's, you ride with the guy in the truck that picks up the guard and the guards, and so I got that, and luckily nobody was sick or unable to do their job. So I just rode that way, and then I stayed at the barracks with the driver, and we went out and made the rounds during the night.
So was this the first time you were out of Nebraska?
No.
I don't think
No,
so.
on fishing trips to Minnesota.
Oh.
Yeah, we'd go to Minnesota on fishing trips and stuff like that. And then, well, that was mostly what my dad liked to do, fish.
So out of basic training, you went to your training to fire this
4.2 mortar. Yeah, and we fired live fire, they called it.
How was that the first time?
Oh, that was the first time we put the round down the tube and went out. That was something.
Were you surprised?
We trained for that without using live ammunition, but yeah, it was a surprise. I mean, it's like having a shotgun shot right next to your head or something like that. And the sound of it. But then you got used to it.
During that time you were learning how to shoot the mortar, was Vietnam, rumors of Vietnam going around?
Mm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was...
Yeah, especially at Fort Polk.
Yeah.
How'd you guys feel about those rumors?
Well, we knew that we were going to get called one way or the other, because it was, I mean, they didn't have enough regular army or whatever that they could send, so that we knew that we were going to get called up.
So when you went on your training weekends,
Right.
or weeks in the summer, what was the first one like? Where'd you go?
The first one that I attended was
In Minnesota.
in Minnesota, Camp Ripley,
Yeah.
I think, Minnesota. And, I was just green because I just got in February. And so I was on KP the whole time. The first one. Once I got to basic training in AIT, then you'd only went on KP when it was your time to go. But this first time I went, it was
KP for the whole.
2 weeks in a row, KP. Got to know the cooks real good.
Oh, jeez. What was the funniest thing ever happened to during those times there? that you can remember that was enjoyable?
Oh, it wasn't too much enjoyable, but
Meeting good friends that you had for a while.
yeah, in basic training, I met a friend that, well, he was a friend for life because he passed away already, but he was one of my best friends. He was in the Oklahoma Guard, and he was called up already, and we went to see him while he was there. He was at Fort Carson, Colorado, and we went to see him.
What did your parents think about you joining the Guard?
Well, it was, my dad was in the Guard, and you know, he thought it was a good deal. You know, if you, it takes you 6 years to get through it, but if you you know, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. So, but I really enjoyed it. Once when I went to basic training, and you don't enjoy that, but the discipline you get from that, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me, I think.
What did you think of him joining the Guard?
Well, I thought it would be a good experience for him, and knowing what I did know about the Guard at that time from friends, yeah, I thought it would be something that he really would excel in, because he's very disciplined in what he does.
So you went on another weekend the next year, went on another week, or?
Yeah, the following year they went to Colorado.
Ooh, that was a
And
good
that
trip.
was to
Yeah, but
Camp Red Devil.
Fort Carson.
Everything he brought home that weekend from that week of training was red. All of his clothes.
That's why they call it Camp Red Devil.
Everything. His
Clay, red clay
clothes
all over.
were covered with this red dirt. And when he handed them to me, I said, I can't get these things clean. So I had to take them to the laundry, and they got them taken care of. But boy, what a mess that was.
When you were out on these weekend or week duties, did you actually play war games? And
Oh yeah.
Oh, they weren't playing.
they weren't.
I mean, no, we knew that our number was up to go.
Yeah.
So I was getting as much training as I could. Some of them guys who jack around all the time, I mean, they weren't even trying, you know. But I knew that our number was going to be called pretty soon, so.
So that was your second trip. You had a third one coming up,
Oh, the summer camp?
the summer camp?
Yeah, see, first we went to Fort Minnesota, anyway, and then we went to Carson, Colorado,
And you were
and then we were going to go back
to Camp Ripley.
to Ripley, but I never made it.
What happened?
The wreck.
Tell me more.
A cattle truck ran into the back of my Jeep.
Were you driving? Or?
No, I was a passenger.
So
it was logged out to me, the Jeep, and I had an assistant driver, and we were supposed to go to pick up an officer at a place called Sioux City, Iowa. It was. We were supposed to pick him up and take him to Minnesota, and we stopped at a rest stop, and the assistant driver didn't have to go, so I went and I came back, and he was behind the wheel. And so I thought, well, we have to stop in Sioux City anyway, and that was just 50 miles up the road. So I thought, well, let him drive, you know. So we took off from there and didn't get very far. and it was rainy and cold that morning. It was in August, but it was cold because the wind was blowing and the rain, and he was cold while he was driving, and he said he wanted his field jacket from back of the Jeep. So I turned and I got the jacket, and then I seen this truck back there. It was going all over the road like this, and I turned around, I set the jacket down, and I told him, watch that truck back there. And then that's the last thing I remember until probably October of that year. I was unconscious and in a coma, they tell me, but I can't remember anything from that. There's bits and pieces I can remember, but nothing that I, because I thought I was dreaming the whole time. I didn't.
It wasn't a dream.
When did you get notified that he had an accident?
When I had dropped him off at Exarban that morning, he put his gear and everything in the back of a APC.
A deuce and a half.
A deuce and a half.
Deuce and a half truck.
And they said that's where he would be riding. And then later in the morning, when the accident happened, I got a phone call from my mother-in-law saying that she had just been called by Bergen Mercy Hospital that Jess was there, and he had been injured in an accident in a Jeep, which was very confusing because he didn't get in a Jeep in the start when we started off. And she said that he was at Bergen Mercy Hospital but didn't know any more information. So I got his brother, who worked at the store also, to take me out to Bergen. When we got there, they had no information whatsoever as to where he came from. They knew he was military because he had a uniform on, but they didn't know what happened to him. Only what the drivers of a private ambulance had told him that he had been in an accident on I-29. And what I learned later was that the cattle truck hit the back of their Jeep, which they were pulling a little trailer, and they rolled from the right-hand side of the interstate through the median over to the left-hand side of the interstate, and the Jeep missed his head by about 1 foot. And when he was very fortunate, there were 2 medics in the vehicle behind them. The medics came and, which I found out many months later, they supposedly did CPR and mouth to mouth because they said he was not breathing. Revived him on the highway. They took him then from there to Missouri Valley. The Missouri Valley Hospital said we can't do anything for him. He needs to be transported to a trauma center in Omaha, and they then put him in an ambulance and sent him there. There was no such thing as helicopters to take him in fast, get him to a hospital quickly. It was a ride in an ambulance. That's when I was called by, and told that he was at Bergen Mercy. When I got there, no one knew where he came from or anything. They just knew the basics of what, that he'd been in an accident and he was in a coma. He was scraped up everywhere. He had mud all over his face. He'd been rolled through the mud. He had mud in his ears. He had scrapes all over his face and arms, and his arm was turning black from the bruising. They said they didn't know what other injuries he had, and it was going to be a long ordeal to get him back to normal.
Was he transferred to a military hospital after that?
It took 2 weeks before he was to a state where they thought they could move him. And the government was wanting to move him to a hospital. They gave us a choice of either sending him to Erling Bergquist, which at that time was closer to our home, but and then or the VA. And I didn't know for sure what kind of long-term situation we were looking at because of the condition that he was in, and I decided it would be better to put him through the VA system. And so he went to the VA hospital in Omaha.
Since this was time during the buildup of Vietnam, was there a lot of a lot of injured there at the VA from the Vietnam War?
A lot of people at the VA at that time were still World War II, but they were starting to get Korean War vets and Vietnam vets. We didn't see an awful lot of the Vietnam vets, mostly Korean War and World War II, but they were overloaded because other hospitals in other locations were so inundated with Vietnam vets that they were having a hard time keeping up with the volume of people there.
Was the reaction in the civilian community against the Vietnam vet, not against, but towards the Vietnam vet, was that good, bad, indifferent?
Yeah, that was a really tough deal because I don't think people realized what the people, what guys were going through and stuff like that. And it was something that I personally worked with the MIA families and the POW families during that time period. And to this day, still wear a bracelet. I've worn this bracelet since my brother-in-law was sent home.
Did you get any reaction from the civilian community?
Mostly when I was flying from Denver, Fitzsimmons Army Hospital, and that was loaded with Vietnam veterans.
That was a whole different story.
Yeah, and they were bad. I mean, they were no legs, no arms. It was bad. And on the people, on the airplanes and stuff, that they would kind of give you a little harassment, this or that, but you shrug your shoulders and I don't know.
Did your since you were hospitalized, did you find out if your organization went to Vietnam? Were they called up?
No, they weren't. They were lucky they weren't, but
they were very close.
They were real close.
Yeah.
Because Jan had a classmate, a lieutenant, in the Guard, and he happened to be stationed in Omaha, and he told me it was real close that we were SRF, Selective Reserve Force, and we were going to be next. So I mean, but this was after the accident happened and everything.
He spent some time in Colorado, because once they got him to a certain point, they decided that he probably needed to be mustered out of the service, and he needed to be evaluated. So they sent him to Colorado to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital out there, and he originally went out there by himself, and he was there for probably a month. And my grandfather passed away, and so he wanted to come home for that, and they were going to send him home. And we decided that because he was very emotionally unsteady at that time, I think the atmosphere there, lack of being around family, he was having memory problems, and a lot of things that he just had a hard time dealing with by himself, and so they allowed me to go back out there with him, and we stayed. My son and I stayed, and Jim too, in a motel across the street from the hospital, and they allowed him to go back and forth to the hospital on a daily basis to.
Why they did that? Because there was nothing happening there. I mean, everything was happening, but they were taking care of the people that they could, and
We were there
we'd have to.
3 months.
I was on a ward with all the head injuries, and it seemed like we just had nothing to do, you know, and we'd have to sit by our bed, and you couldn't do anything else, you know. If they would come to get you for an appointment, they would, you know, you'd have to be there. So
It was a very difficult time because they had lack of things to keep them occupied, and it was a very depressing place to be in, and emotionally it was a really hard time for him because he would see all these guys coming back from Vietnam and, you know, arms and legs missing and stuff like that. Realized actually that he was very blessed that he didn't have to go.
luckier than I was, you know, because I mean, the concussion that I had was very severe. But
To see those guys, it was really emotionally
to see.
upsetting.
And there's a lot of guys with head injuries too, because they were on my ward that were in Vietnam.
Her son was just a toddler, probably almost 3 years old at that time. And we used to go to church on Sunday, and he found a gentleman that was amputee in a wheelchair one time, having a hard time getting up into the area for church. And as a little guy, he got behind the wheelchair, pushed him into church. And he did that every Sunday. Sorry.
Did any of your buddies go to Vietnam?
Oh yeah, yeah, a lot of that. I ran into buddies at Fitzsimmons that was in Vietnam. One that I know was a pretty good buddy, and he was shipped back here and in Offutt Hospital for a while, and then they moved him out to Fitzsimmons. He had he didn't get hurt in the war. It was
I think he had Parkinson's, didn't he?
Parkinson's? No, what do you call that?
I'm not sure.
It's a cancer, but
Leukemia?
no, it wasn't that. Hodgkin's disease. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Hodgkin's disease he got. And later on, I got moved from the head ward where the head injuries were out to the barracks, and he, by the time I found out he had been gone already, they let him go home, and it wasn't long he passed away.
Yeah, he died
from that.
shortly after that.
But
to almost finish up our story here, What would you like to tell future generations that will see this video? And basically, what would you like to tell them that about your story? An impression, or is there something you want to tell them?
Well,
If you love your country.
yeah, don't give up on your country. Don't let the politicians do it to you. Stay with the I don't know exactly how to put it. I mean,
What would you like to tell people about your loving nurse, wife,
oh,
spouse?
that's, some people say, well, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, but it's true. That's the best thing that ever happened to me. But, I mean, we've been friends for so long, and we've been married a long time, and
The National Guard was probably one of the best things that ever happened to him.
yep,
I think it matured him. It made him more.
basic training and
Yeah.
AIT.
And I think it's something that if you don't want to go into a regular Army, Navy, Marines, if you don't want to, or the Air Force, go in the National Guard. Go in the National Guard. You're going to be trained in learn an awful lot, and it's a way of serving your country. Maybe not in the traditional way, but it is a way of serving your country.
Okay, Jeff, thank you for your service.
Thank you.